So what is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Movement6 and I've just got back from some running, and during the running, about 20-25 minutes, I had the time to think about this video and if my thoughts or my strain of thoughts could be right on this one before I started making it, because I'm really concerned about this. But before we get into this, I want to say a huge thank you to everybody who subbed this week, and especially a warm welcome to everybody who subbed on Twitch. Most of you know I started streaming about a month ago, and I'm not hugely advertising for it, but if you go to twitchtv.com, search for Movement6, you will find me, and I'm streaming almost daily. Rainbow Six Siege, Modern Warfare, Warzone, and any other game I like. I will stream there, but predominantly first-person shooters online, okay? So I love to see you guys there. Thanks for all the sub. If you're new here, don't forget to sub and hit that notifications button so you won't miss a thing. Now let's get into Resident Evil 4 Remake. So it is pretty well, it's expected, right, that another Resident Evil will get the same overhaul remake treatment as 2 and 3. And I was glad what they've done to 2. I'm a huge Resident Evil fan. 1, 2, even 3, which was a bit more action-packed. Resident Evil 4, but especially Resident Evil Code Veronica X, which was a bit of a spin-off, right? And then Resident Evil 4 came out. I've got a very unpopular opinion for you guys. I don't like Resident Evil 4. I never liked it. I've played it, of course. I was completely into the atmosphere of Resident Evil at the time, and then Resident Evil 4 came out. I was already a bit amazed about the story and what they've done to it, but hey, let's go for it. It's Resident Evil. What could go wrong? To me, Resident Evil 4 marks the beginning of the decline of the series. It's not a Resident Evil as we know it. It is an action-packed run from point A to point B. What are you selling? What are you buying? Action-packed game. And it just didn't land with me, and Resident Evil 5 and 6 were an even further decline of the series, and we needed to wait until Resident Evil 7, which although was first person, it brought back what made Resident Evil so good back in the days. And back in the days, I still liked the tank controls, I still liked the weird camera angles and the atmosphere the door loading sequence is bringing. Although it was more a trick to cover up the technical limitations at the time, the whole game still has an atmosphere, which I am very lucky to see was fantastically captured in Resident Evil 2 Remake. Despite the fact that we're looking at a first-person, over-the-shoulder, despite the fact that we're looking at an over-the-shoulder view, third-person, the whole game just breathes what Resident Evil 2 was at the time. Now, Resident Evil 3 was a quick cash grab. If you want to see my full opinion on that, I've made a video on that not so long ago, but a couple of days ago. I think it's a game that should have never been made. They took out everything that made Resident Evil 2 Nemesis great. Nemesis is not scary. Sometimes you just forget that he's there. The boss fights are completely forgettable. And I already saw, and that's what I predicted, I already saw the first under an hour and a half speedrun passing by. Now, I fully got someone online who said Resident Evils are never known for their long story modus. I could agree with that to a certain point, but Resident Evil 1, when it first came out, people were actually stuck. And it took maybe 8 or 9 hours to finish it. And there were multiple endings. Same with 2, same with 3, multiple endings, choices. It had replay value. Resident Evil 3 Remake has 0 replay value. 0. If you played it once, you can play it the same time, exactly the same way in the second run. So now Resident Evil 4, and there are a lot of people, die-hard Resident Evil fans, that would rather see a Code Veronica X, including me, than Resident Evil 4. But okay, they chose Resident Evil 4, which was of course critically acclaimed at the time as being one of the best games at the time. Let's get into it, because I was reading an article on bgr.com. It's an article by Jacob Siegel. You can find him on Twitter at Jacob Siegel, which everybody's entitled to their opinion. It's a good piece, it's a good article, but I really disagree on some fronts here. Now, following the success of Resident Evil 2 and 3 Remake, Capcom is said to be working on a remake of the highest rated entry in the series, Resident Evil 4. It began production in 2018 and is planned for 2022. And this is already my first issue with this game. This is going to be cross-platform, right? PlayStation 4, Xbox One versus PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X, One X, Series X. This will not be. I would suggest 2020 is going to be the year that the new generation is going to come out, right? With 2 years, 2022, into the next generation, considering the fact that a generation lasts 7-8 years, we're already well 25% into the lifespan of the new hardware. Focus on the new hardware, not on the old one. I know you want to spread risk, that also people on PlayStation 4 can still play it, but come on, we're already 2 Christmases ahead, maybe even 3, depending on the timing of the 2022. There is no reason. There is absolutely no reason. Make it a next generation release. And just imagine the quality you can reach with the new hardware, right? You can't optimize, because eventually you need to optimize it for the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One, making it a title which not will reach its full potential on the next hardware. Remasters of old videos can sometimes feel like cheap cash grabs. Remasters. Well, to me, Resident Evil 1 remaster wasn't a quick cash grab, because although it was a remaster, they did added new content to it. But over the last 2 years, we've seen developers take classic titles and completely rebuild them from the ground up. Square Enix Final Fantasy VII Remake is being launched as one of the best games of 2020. Now, I'm not a Final Fantasy fan, but a good friend of mine is, and he's enjoying the hell out of it. So I will take it from him that this is actually a good Final Fantasy. And it launched just 7 days after Resident Evil 3 Remake. And Jacob stated that, which has also been well received. No, Resident Evil 3 is not a good game. Not by the stretch of an imagination. If you look at sales figures, I could say yes, it's being well received. If you look at revenue, it's well received. And that was expected, because Resident Evil 2 Remake turned out to be a fantastic game with a huge replay value, a lot of content, new areas, new ways, new story modes, new storylines. Resident Evil 3 had none of that. It's a dull, easy, I would say lazy game where they took everything out. And yes, it sold well, because if you're a Resident Evil fan, you want to play this remake because you played 2 Remake, it was good, so you're going to buy 3 as well. But eventually, all those people and all those reviews on YouTube more and more suggest and also explicitly tell that it's just a very big disappointment. But few game studios, if any, have made remakes as much of a priority as Capcom. Resident Evil 2 was top rated, sure it is. Resident Evil 3 somehow launched just 15 months later. Not somehow. They were also already developing Resident Evil 3 when they were still in Resident Evil 2 developing modus. And they said, literally Capcom said, if Resident Evil 2 is going to be a success, we will do Resident Evil 3 as well. It was already in development. If Resident Evil 2 turns out to be a disaster, then they would just stop Resident Evil 3 and move on with something else. Forget about remakes. Resident Evil 2 was a huge success, the remake. Now, Resident Evil 3 was already in development, they pushed it out. Now, Resident Evil 3 is an estimated release window of 2022. Huge mistake to do it cross-platform. More to that later. VGC, which has been the source of several noteworthy gaming industry leaks in recent months, including this one about a bunch of Mario remasters for the Switch, claims that development of Resident Evil 4 Remake is being led by M2 Inc., which is a relatively new studio backed by Capcom and founded by former Platinum Games CEO Tatsuya Minami, the project has reportedly been in the works since 2018, and other studios, including Capcom itself, will likely assist, as was the case with the Resident Evil 3 remake. So the M2 Inc. was the exact same studio that did Resident Evil 3 remake. To me, that's a huge red flag. It's a huge. I sincerely hope that they will give it the same treatment as Resident Evil 2. Then it will be a very enjoyable game. It still doesn't really make up for the flaws I'm seeing in Resident Evil 4, which is it's not a Resident Evil game. It's a storyline that it's not been capitalized on any further. It's just very linear, A to B, and it abolishes everything Resident Evil made before that. Resident Evil 1, 2, 3, and Code Veronica X were Resident Evil games. Resident Evil 4 is the turning point of turning in the whole franchise. In a second report citing insider Dusk Golem, VGC reports that Resident Evil 4 has a larger team than those that worked on the previous two remakes. It's a green flag. Several of the people who will be working on this new remake were part of the development of the original Resident Evil 4, which came out in 2005 on the game. They include the producer Hideyoki Kobayashi and the designer Koi Kayaki, if I pronounce that right. But the remake is reportedly being directed by a series newcomer at M2. VGC says that the M2 is listening closely to feedback on the Resident Evil 3 remake. Well, that's a lot of feedback to take in. One, don't scrap anything, just add. Same thing with Resident Evil 2. Yeah, they did scrap some things just to make the flow a bit better and to, nowadays the expectations of a game are a bit different than back in the days, right? So they did make a lot of changes to scrap some things, but they add a lot of new content, a lot of new storylines, and they also deepened a lot of storylines. That would be absolutely fantastic to take Resident Evil 4 and change it a bit, update it to nowadays standards, but add, don't scrap, add. Make it a game that you want to play more. Resident Evil 3 is one of the most forgettable games, the remake is one of the most forgettable games out there. Now here it goes on with some of the leaks we've just got into. So finally, Shinami Mikami, who directed Resident Evil 4, is said to have given the remake his full approval. Well, thank you. But will not be heavily involved as his current obligation is to Ghostwire Tokyo for Bethesda. Resident Evil 4 was a high watermark for the franchise, receiving near universal praise when it originally launched in 2005. The over-the-shoulder perspective was adopted by virtually every third-person shooter that followed, and it has been ported to Windows, Wii, PS3, blah, blah, blah. It's true, it was groundbreaking, as was Resident Evil 1 back in the days, Resident Evil 2, 3, and Code Veronica X. They were groundbreaking games, and I gotta give credit to Resident Evil 4 because they did also change a lot in the industry with showing a over-the-shoulder view for games like that. As the Golem notes in the Twitter threads above, Resident Evil 4 Remake will not be the next Resident Evil game to hit the store shelves. They're currently very deep in Resident Evil 8, which is said to feature the same first-person perspective as Resident Evil 7, but also many narrative and mechanical departures for the series. Resident Evil 8 will launch for current and next-gen consoles in 2021. This is my biggest concern. What you usually see in the beginning of new generation hardware is that developers struggle because they've got a very huge amount of people remaining on the old platform, PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and very early adopters, which is growing in terms of size of the new gaming platform, right? Now, you need to make choices. Am I going to develop for the new generation hardware? You will have a very limited base of people that are going to buy your games. Or am I going to develop for the old hardware only? I will have a bigger audience, but I will miss out on bringing new and extra features. And that is a heavy split for these guys. So they start developing on both platforms and they optimize the hell out of it for the older platforms and then more or less port it and maybe with some updates add some shit, but that's it, right? It's not going to capitalize on the new hardware. Sometimes it leads to issues, sometimes it leads to unforgettable games because they're more busy with porting it for both systems. On the other side, I do get it for 2021. But if we're looking at 2022, which is sad here, that Resident Evil 4 Remake is planned for 2022, there is no reason anymore to go for a cross-platform launch. I would say take high-end PCs, and you've got the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X, and make Resident Evil 4 Remake one hell of a visual spectacle on the new gaming consoles, the new platforms, right? There is no reason. So to me, the biggest concerns is, to sum up, Resident Evil 4, and that is a personal note I have, not the best entry in the Resident Evil environment. I know it's very unpopular to say, I just didn't like it. Although the game by no means is bad, it's just that it's not a Resident Evil game. The same people working on Resident Evil 4 were also involved with the Resident Evil 3 remake, which to me is a very forgettable game that is nothing more than a DLC for Resident Evil 2 remake, and is in no way an homage to the old Resident Evil 3. And the release cycle of 2022, still wanting to do cross-platform on old and new generation hardware. Don't do that. Go for new generation hardware. But okay, I'm not in the boardroom, right? This is just an opinion I have. I'm, as always, very curious on what you guys think. Are you looking out for a Resident Evil 4 remake? Do you think it makes sense to do it cross-platform? Do you think that it's a good sign that people that involved with Resident Evil 2 remake are doing Resident Evil 4 remake? What did you think about Resident Evil 3 remake? So to me, these are the top concerns I have about this game. If you want to see the full article, go to bgr.com and just look for Resident Evil 4 remake and you will find it from Jacob Seagull. For now, guys, this is just my 2 cents on the game already. I hope you're having a blast. I hope you stay safe in this lockdown. This crisis will pass and we will all shake hands and high five and hug each other very soon. For now, don't forget to sub. Don't forget to put on your notifications. And I hope to see you guys on Twitch. For now, back to the madness, guys.